Every Saturday, Jason S. family arrived hungry, empty containers in hand, ready to eat Sophia's expensive meals and take leftovers home. For years, she smiled, cooked, served, and paid for everything. But when her mother-in-law started preaching about modern separate finances, Sophia finally understood the game. So the next family lunch looked very different. No prime rib, no homemade dessert, no perfect table. Just Jason, panic, burnt food, raw pasta, and a family forced to taste the consequences of their own advice.
From this paycheck on, our finances are separate. My husband said he was tired of supporting me. I happily agreed. Later, his family arrived always hungry enough to empty our pantry. But this time, the kitchen estate made them shriek. Before we continue, please hit that like and subscribe button. Now, listen. Alina woke at 6 to her alarm. Even though the sun had yet to hit the chilly Seattle skyline, she hated rushing. She crept out to avoid waking Greg. A splash of cold water finally snapped her awake. At 31, she had spent 8 years climbing the ladder at a top tech firm. From product lead to head of operations, she was thriving. Her salary hit $8,000 a month, plus quarterly bonuses reaching $3,000. It was high stress, filled with technical nightmares and constant deadlines. Still, Alina loved fixing disasters. She hit the kitchen, fired up the espresso maker, and started breakfast. Cooking was her therapy. Chopping veggies or kneading dough let her mind reset after a day of brutal, endless emails. Weekends meant 5 hours of recipe testing her pure joy. Greg drifted in around 7, dishevelled and groggy. He was a mechanical designer for an engineering firm, pulling in $5,500 a month. In Seattle, that was a solid, comfortable wage. 5 years ago, when they married, Alina set the tone, no outdated gender roles. She wasn't playing the traditional housewife. Greg had nodded then, barely listening. Later, life took over, and Alina naturally claimed the household chores, not because she had to, but because she enjoyed the order. She loved a clean home. Cooking became her escape, and Greg never asked for it, he just grew to expect it. That morning, they ate avocado toast with smoked salmon and fresh orange juice. Greg scrolled through his phone in silence. Alina finished her coffee and watched him. He seemed miles away, but she didn't pry. Everyone deserves their own space. Greg left first for a 9 o'clock meeting. Alina stayed to tackle the kitchen dishwasher, counters, laundry. It was mechanical, fast, and completely effortless. Work was the usual hurricane. A supplier stalled, forcing her to scramble for new shipping routes. Between 3 video calls and a dozen emails, she fixed the crisis just in time for lunch. Her director, Mr. Hayes, simply nodded, impressed, as always. He was used to her fixing impossible messes. That evening, she stopped at an upscale grocer near their home. Saturday was approaching, and that meant the weekly invasion. This ritual started 3 years ago, right after Greg's brother Ian had his 3rd child. Ian was 38, his wife Maya was 34. Kids were tiny 2 boys and a 4-year-old girl. Mia looked perpetually drained, and Ian was always on edge. That was when Greg's mother, Susan, decided everyone should gather at Alina and Greg's place every Saturday. Their house was spacious, and Alina's cooking was the draw, giving Mia a weekly break. Alina never complained. She loved the crowd, the praise, and seeing people fed. Her cart filled up fast, a massive prime rib, organic vegetables, artisanal greens, heavy cream, imported cheeses, and flour for homemade garlic knots, plus plenty of fruit. She grabbed raspberries, blueberries, dark chocolate, and dairy too. At the register, the total hit $185. Alina paid, tucking the receipt into a specific spot in her wallet. She tracked every penny in a spreadsheet, not to be stingy, but for the sense of control. Back home, Greg was glued to his laptop on the sofa. Elena hauled the heavy bags into the kitchen to unpack. Her husband peeked in at the mountain of supplies. Parents are coming tomorrow, right?
Yes, plus Ian, Mia, and the kids. That is a lot of food. 9 people total. Plus, they always take leftovers home for the week.
Greg just nodded and turned back to his screen. Elena started planning. Prime rib in the oven first, that takes hours. Then scalloped potatoes, fresh salads, garlic knots, and a chocolate tart. Saturday morning, she was up early, apron on, prepping the meat to the sound of soft jazz. Poured a massive coffee and got to work. Herbs, garlic, and coarse salt went onto the roast before it hit the oven. Then she sliced potatoes paper thin for the gratin, simmering them in heavy cream and Gruyere. She moved with practiced, surgical speed. Every motion snickened nature. Greg's stumbled in at 11 in a wrinkled shirt. The kitchen smelled incredible. Need help? Could you set the dining table? Top drawer for the good mats. He obeyed, grabbing the silverware. Elena was finishing the tart, placing the final raspberry just as the clock struck 1. Her in-laws were aggressively punctual. Susan led the way, tall, sturdy, and wearing a permanent frown. Susan lugged a tote bag. Elena knew it was packed with empty containers for her haul. Behind her trailed Ian, looking exhausted, and Mia, pale with dark circles. Dragging the 3 kids, the boys sprinted for the toys, while the little girl clung to her mother. Elena began laying out the spread prime rib cooked to perfection, bubbly scalloped potatoes, a massive salad with pecans, and warm garlic knots. Susan circled the table like a health inspector. Well, you tried. Potatoes look okay, but the meat is underdone. Salad needs more dressing, but fine, it is edible. Elena just smiled. Susan S.'s signature move, a backhanded compliment followed by a dig. It usually rolled off her back, but today it stung. The meal was chaotic. The kids were screaming. The youngest only wanted bread, and the adults complained. Ian whined about his impossible boss and failing team. Mia vented about daycare drama. Susan griped about her social security check. Can't survive on this money anymore, she complained. Prices are just insane. Greg stayed quiet. Elena was silent too, just watching them. The joy of feeding people was gone. After the feast, Susan immediately pulled those empty containers out of her bag. She started scooping. A huge hunk of prime rib, all the leftover potatoes, half the salad. Elena watched as 5 hours of work and nearly $200 of groceries vanished into plastic tubs. She used to call it normal. She told herself it helped the family. But as she watched her mother-in-law pack it all away, a sharp irritation spiked in her chest. Maybe it was the critique, or just the weight of 3 years piling up. Guests left by 6. Greg cleared the table while I wiped down counters, saving enough leftovers for a light dinner. Once the house was quiet, I sat at my laptop and opened the budget spreadsheet I had managed for years. It started in college when every dollar counted. I logged yesterday's grocery bill of $185. Curiosity got the better of me, so I checked past weekend dinners. $160, $175, $190, $150, $200. I fired up the calculator and started adding $9,000. That is what I had spent on weekend meals for his family in just 1 year. I sat back, stunned. That number did not even include our regular groceries, bills, cleaning supplies, or holiday gifts. I had never tallied the cost of catering to his family. I just cooked and enjoyed hosting, but seeing that figure in black and white changed something. I did not feel rage, just a cold, sharp clarity. Anger is a waste of energy. Still, the balance was clearly broken. I provided the funds and the labour, only to get critiques on my cooking. I closed the laptop and headed to the kitchen to prepare a salad with whatever scraps remained. Greg was watching basketball in the living room. I joined him with tea. The next week, he seemed distracted. He would come home, eat in silence, and scroll through articles on his phone, looking troubled. I let it be. Everyone has their own burdens. Wednesday night, he suddenly spoke up. Peters told me an interesting story today. Who is Peters? A new guy in engineering, mid-40s, divorced. I kept eating my salad. What did he say? He was talking about his divorce settlement. His ex-wife got half the house despite not working for years, and now she wants alimony. He says his biggest mistake was the joint bank account. The judge ruled she was entitled to half of everything. I looked up from my plate. Why are you telling me this? Just sharing his experience. He says if they had kept finances separate, the divorce would have been way cleaner. She could not have claimed a cent. I see. He thinks it is smarter for modern couples to keep money separate. Everyone handles their own costs. You know exactly what you spend. No lack of control. I finished my salad and wiped my mouth. Greg, if you have something to say it directly. Stop using your coworker as a mouthpiece. No, I was just thinking about it. Okay, I took my plate to the sink. I hate games. If he wanted to change our setup, he should just say it. The next day, he was just as quiet. I made salmon with rosemary. He sat at the island, scowling at his phone again. I caught a glimpse of his screen, an article on financial independence in marriage. I stayed silent. After dinner, I washed dishes while he retreated to the living room. Through the doorway, I watched him searching online. He was building up to something. I would not rush him. He would say it when he was ready. Friday was busy, so I stayed late at the office. I got home late, wiped out. Greg just warmed up leftovers. We ate in total silence. Saturday started way too early. By 8, I was at an upscale market buying fish for a salt-crusted base. It was pricey, $35 a pound, so I grabbed a big one with organic produce and fancy cheese. The total hit $170 back home. I packed the fish in a thick salt crust. Shoved the tray in. Risotto, fresh greens, the works. By 1, the table was ready. The family arrived right on time. Carol walked in, sniffing the air. Smells like fish, sea base, at these prices. I stayed quiet. She wandered off. The meal was a hit-perfect fish. Even the kids loved it. Michael seemed happy, though Carol grumbled. The risotto was mushy and the lemonade was tart. Typical. Couldn't leave without a jab. I thought about the $170 and hours of work that meal cost. As we finished, Carol grabbed her plastic containers. Then she locked eyes with me. Hey, Alina, did you know young couples are splitting their money now? I froze. Separate. Yeah, each person covers their own expenses. She claimed it was just more convenient. Avoids money fights and builds character. I set the plates down. Where did you read that? On the internet. Lots of articles. I sent one to Ryan. Right, honey? Ryan went bright red and nodded. My mind went cold. I finally saw the whole game. Carol had planted the idea. He'd talked to his toxic manager, and now she was pushing it in front of everyone. I see, I said, Carol, feeling bold. Kept going. I read that joint accounts are outdated. Since you both work, why not be independent? It is the modern way. Very modern, I agreed. She kept talking, fishing for a reaction. You work hard, Alina. Try it. Everyone keeps their own cash. Total freedom. I nodded and headed to the kitchen with the dishes. Behind me, she started packing her containers. She took half the fish, all the risotto, and the lemonade. A free haul for her week. They left late. Ryan cleaned in silence while I loaded the washer. We were done talking. Once the kitchen was spotless, I retreated to my home office and pulled out my box of receipts. I downloaded my bank statements and started crunching the final numbers. Weekend dinners for his family cost $9,000 a year. Our groceries were $6,000. Utilities were $3,000. Split. That is $1,500 each. Cleaning supplies cost $1,200. Plus my clothes were $1,500. I was ready. I crunched the numbers. Gifts, holidays, and regular bills ate up almost my entire $8,000 monthly salary. I was left with just $500 for myself. Meanwhile, Ryan contributed a measly $150 to shared costs. Ryan kept $4,500 for gadgets, beer nights, and his mother. He spent on himself, always. I closed my laptop, financial independence. It was a bold idea. I wondered how long Ryan could actually handle it. Sipped tea, smiling. A fascinating experiment was starting. Ryan had been acting restless, clearly itching to say something. I watched him like a scientist at a lab bench. He brought up his manager, Dave, and some article about money. He claimed shared finances lead to resentment. I kept chopping tomatoes. I asked him if he felt taken advantage of. I gave him zero help, let him sweat. Wednesday night, he was waiting on the couch when I got home. Dinner was silent. After my shower, I found him picking at a pillow. He finally told me we needed to talk. I waited. He looked anxious, pinching the bridge of his nose. I knew that he wanted to change things. Suggested managing money separately, modern, fair, and conflict-free. I asked if we even had any financial conflicts at all. I pressed him. Why the sudden need for freedom? He finally blurted it out, terrified of losing his nerve. He told me. He was tired of supporting me. Cold, hard silence. The words I expected had finally been spoken. I smiled slowly. He braced for a fight, but I agreed. I loved the idea of separate, modern, equitable finances. Ryan was stunned. He had rehearsed a huge argument, but instead, he got immediate, cheerful compliance. I kissed his cheek and went to bed, leaving him totally confused. He didn't know whether to cheer or panic. I felt ice cold. Ryan wanted his own way. He was going to get exactly that, plus the consequences. I was a woman of action. I rose early, dressed sharp, and prepared for a very different kind of morning. Ryan was still snoring. I cooked breakfast, but only for myself. 3 eggs, some salt, a hot sizzling skillet. I added avocado and premium lox to my sourdough toast. I sat at the island checking emails while I ate. I enjoyed every bite. Ryan finally shuffled in, freezing when he saw the single-place setting. I ignored him completely. He demanded his breakfast. I told him to cook his own, citing the new rule of separate, individual financial responsibility. He was floored. He marched to the fridge and threw it open to find everything labelled with bright pink stickers. Every single item was marked mine. I told him that separate management required physical separation. He looked absolutely horrified. I stood up, cleaned my dishes, and grabbed my bag. I reminded him that I was just following his rules. I left him staring at the sea of pink stickers. He chugged some water and stormed out, slamming the door. I smiled, driving to work. At lunch, I treated myself to a $45 salad and wine, pure bliss. I opened a new high-yield account, moved $2,000 over, and locked it away. His money was his problem. After work, I hit the local market. I grabbed a cart and wandered the aisles, ignoring the usual family staples. Today was for me. Jumbo shrimp, the ones Brian called overpriced, and 5 ripe avocados he refused to touch. A hunk of sharp blue cheese that made him gag. A fresh sea bass fillet, asparagus, mountains of berries, Belgian chocolate, a crisp wine, premium coffee pods, and the expensive olive oil. Everything for me. I grabbed organic greens, fresh herbs, and sparkling water. The bill hit $220. I paid without a flinch. My money, my rules. Brian was home when I arrived, slumped on the sofa, staring at his phone. I hauled the bags to the kitchen. Brian didn't budge. I put my shrimp and fish in the top freezer drawer labelled with a pink sticker. Avocados, cheese, and berries went onto my own fridge shelf. Coffee and chocolate followed suit. I pulled out a small pantry cabinet I had picked up on the way home, set it in the corner, and padlocked it. I looped the key onto a chain around my neck. Brian wandered in, eyes wide at the locked cabinet. What is that, my pantry? Locked, so stuff stays put. You serious? Separate budgets need clear boundaries. I want zero confusion. Lost your mind? Actually, the opposite. Buy anything for dinner. Bryson stayed quiet. He had tried to shop earlier, but froze in the aisle, clueless. He ended up with the basics: pizza rolls, cheap bread, margarine, discount hot dogs, and a jar of mayo. He spent maybe $15. His sad pile of food sat on the bottom shelf, looking lonely. I thawed my shrimp, sliced an avocado with cherry tomatoes, and prepped some arugula. I sautéed the shrimp in garlic and lemon. I plated it perfectly, drizzled a vinaigrette, and shaved fresh parmesan over the top. I poured a glass of wine, put on my headphones, and sat at the island to enjoy my meal in peace. Brian stood at the stove, hovering over his boiling hot dogs. He fished them out 10 minutes later. They were bloated and split. He slapped them onto 2 pieces of plain bread with a glob of mayo, and ate in the living room, fuming in silence while the TV droned on. Washed my plate and glass, leaving his crusty pot and tongs in the sink. I grabbed a novel and curled up in the chair. Brian glared at me, then the mess, and finally stood up to scrub. He spent 15 minutes clattering pans and cursing under his breath. He collapsed on the couch, glued to his phone again. We went to bed in total silence, sticking to opposite edges of the mattress. Friday started the same way. I had oatmeal with fresh fruit and coffee, while Brian stared at his leftover hot dogs. He buttered a slice of bread, threw on a cold dog, and choked it down with tap water. I finished, cleaned up, and left for work. Brian watched me walk out the door, nursing his glass of water. I crushed my annual review. My boss loved my numbers. I snagged the top rating and a $2,500 bonus. I walked out beaming and immediately tucked the cash into my private, secret emergency fund. At lunch, I met my friend Sarah at a steakhouse. I ordered the filet. Sarah got a lobster roll. "How are things at home?" Sarah asked. "Fascinating," I replied. "What does that mean?" Brian insisted on separate finances. I said yes. Sarah nearly choked on her lunch. Separate? Since yesterday, it is every person for themselves. How is that going? Amazing. I cook for one. He is on his own. Let us see how he handles that. Sarah laughed. You are cold, I love it. How's he doing? 2 days in. Yesterday, boiled hot dogs. Today, cold ones on dry bread. And you, jumbo shrimp, smoked salmon, that fancy cheese he always hated. Good for you. Maybe he'll finally get it. They finished espressos. Chloe paid her $65 share without blinking. It felt amazing. Before, she never spent on herself. Now, her cash was her own. She stopped for fresh oysters on the way home. Wanted to try shucking them. Grabbed a baguette. camembert, figs, and local honey. $85 gone. When she walked in, David was starving and livid. He'd eaten a greasy cafeteria lunch that wrecked his stomach. David watched her, offering no help. Chloe grabbed her knife and got to work. She arranged the shellfish on ice with lemon. She toasted bread and set up a spread of cheese, figs, and honey. She poured wine, sat at the island, and put on music. One bite of that buttery oyster pure heaven. Arthur stumbled in, eyeing the feast. He was starving. His own fridge held nothing but stale bread and regret. Chloe? Yeah? Can we stop this? Stop what? The money thing. Let's go back to normal. Arthur, it's been 2 days. You pushed for this. You called it fair. I didn't think you would be this literal. How else should I take it, you demanded? Total separation. I just agreed. We manage our own accounts now. Each covers their own costs. That's not what I meant. Then what did you? Arthur opened his mouth, then snapped it shut. He couldn't explain without sounding like a jerk. He walked out. Chloe finished her dinner and headed to the lounge. Arthur sat on the couch, hungry and fuming. Eventually, he stomped into the kitchen. Chloe heard clattering and burning oil. 20 minutes later, he returned with rubbery, charred eggs. He ate them with a scowl. It was Saturday, usually. Chloe spent dawn prepping a feast for his family. She slept until 10, wasted time on her phone. No rush. Arthur rolled out at 11, stretched and froze. Chloe, my parents are coming over today. Chloe didn't look up from her book. Yeah. I remember. You going to start cooking? No. Arthur stood paralyzed. What do you mean? No. We have separate budgets. I don't cook for guests that aren't mine. Your parents are on you. You want to feed them? You cook or you order out. Chloe, you can't do this. Why not? They are family. You always cooked for them. We used to use joint money, sure. Now, we have separate accounts. Host them on your own dime. The rules change the rules you set. Arthur grabbed his phone and bolted to the balcony. Chloe heard him frantically arguing. He tried to get his mom to cancel, but she was already on her way. 1 hour out, he walked back in, face pale. They are coming. What do? I told you. Cook or order food. You still have time, Chloe, please. Need some advice. I have never cooked for a crowd. The web has millions of recipes, or I could hire a caterer. Delivery costs a fortune, though. Cooking is cheaper. Help me out. Arthur paced the living room, grabbed his jacket, and bolted. Sarah heard his engine roar as he peeled out. She went back to her book. 40 minutes later, Arthur sprinted inside, dumping plastic bags on the island. Deli potato salad, frozen pizzas, wings, lasagna, cheap sushi, and a grocery store cake. He cranked the oven to 450, shoving it all in. Pizzas, lasagna, wings all at once. Sarah walked in for water, took one look at the chaos, smiled, and left. Arthur was spinning, checking the oven. Some burned while others stayed frozen. At 1 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. Sarah opened it. Brenda stood there with empty food containers, alongside Mark, Jen, and the kids. Her mother-in-law wrinkled her nose. What is that smell, Sarah? What did you cook? Nothing, come in. Brenda looked confused and marched into the living room. Sarah immediately sat down and opened her book. You are reading on a Saturday with guests? Yes, it is a thrilling chapter. Get comfortable. The family sat, looking awkward. The kids rushed to the playroom. Mark and Jen shared a glance. Usually, the dining table would be set for a feast. Today the room was empty. Arthur ran out of the kitchen sweating, face bright red. It is ready. Everything is ready. I will set the table. Started bringing out the food. Deli salad in the plastic tub. Pizzas charred black, doughy in the middle. Wings scorched and bleeding near the bone. Lasagna was a lukewarm, soapy disaster. Sushi sat sweating in its tray. He tossed down paper plates. Brenda stared at the spread, horrified. "Son, did you cook this?" "Well, I bought and heated it." Sarah did not cook. His mother spun towards Sarah. "Why on earth not?" Sarah marked her page calmly. "We manage our money separately now, remember? 3 weeks ago, you said that was convenient. Arthur took your advice. Everyone is responsible for themselves now. I cook for myself with my money. If Arthur wants to host, he cooks with his money. But we are family. You are Arthur's family. He can spend on us. And he did, with his money. My money stays my money." Brenda opened her mouth but had no words. Mark chuckled. Jen bit her lip to stop laughing. Dinner began in tense silence. The potato salad was bland with cheap mayo. The pizza tasted like ash. The wings were rubbery and dangerous. The lasagna was cold inside. The sushi was mush. The kids refused to eat. And the youngest started wailing for real food. Jen tried to soothe her, but she kept crying. Brenda sat stone-faced. Mark chewed a charred crust in silence. Jen just drank water. 20 minutes later, they all quit pretending. They sat there in aggressive silence. Usually, this was when coffee and dessert were served. Today, you could hear a pin drop. Finally, Brenda snapped. "Arthur, would you mind explaining what is going on here?" Arthur squirmed. "Sarah and I decided to split our finances. Everyone pays for their own expenses. Why would you do something so stupid? It is modern. It is fair. You said so yourself." Brenda turned purple. "I did not mean this then." "What did you mean?" Sarah closed her book. She walked to the table and sat down. "Brenda, 3 weeks ago you lectured me about separate finances. You said it was convenient, modern and fair." Arthur agreed. "Now we do things separately. What is the problem?" "The problem is you are making a fool of yourself. You are letting your husband starve. I am not letting anyone starve. Arthur is an adult. He can cook, order out, or buy pre-made food. He has his own paycheck. But you are his wife. You have obligations. My obligations as a wife do not include providing free catering to my husband's relatives every single Saturday. I work full-time. I earn my own salary. I pay my half of the bills. We are equals. Or do you think we are not?" Brenda's face flushed deep red. "You were never this cold, no. I used to cook for you with joy because we were a family. But since you insisted we operate as separate entities, we are not a family. We are individuals responsible for ourselves." Mark let out a sharp, dry laugh. "Arthur, Sarah is right." "Mark," his mother gasped. "Mum, drop it. She is 100% right. We got used to coming here and eating for free, off Sarah's diamond labour. She spent a fortune and hours cooking for us. We have been absolute freeloaders." Jen nodded. "Your brother is right. I always felt guilty, but you kept saying it was normal, and Sarah loved it." "I did love it," Sarah said, "as long as our budget was shared. Now that it is separated, the rules have changed." Brenda clamped her mouth shut. Suddenly, she stood up and grabbed her bag. "We are leaving. Kids, get your coats." Mark and Jen gathered the crying children. At the door, Mark turned to his brother. "Arthur, think hard about what you are doing. Sarah is not the villain here. You started this idiotic game." The door clicked shut. Arthur stood alone in the dining room, looking at the ruined food, dirty paper plates, and the closed door. Then he looked at Sarah. She walked back to the couch, opened her book, and started reading. "Arthur, please tell me we can stop this now. Go back to how things were. It has been 3 days. Are you giving up on the financial independence you begged for?" "I am not giving up. I just realize this is wrong." "What exactly is wrong?" "That we eat separate meals, that we cook separately. We are married. we should do things together. Then why did you demand separate finances? Arthur stayed silent. You listened to your buddy, whose ex-wife took him to the cleaners. And you listened to your mother, who planted the idea in your brain. You genuinely thought I was taking advantage of you, that I was squandering your hard-earned money. Am I wrong? It was not exactly like that. Exactly like that. You thought separate money gave you total control. If I spent only my money and you spent only yours, everything would be perfect. But you never stopped to think that separate finances means separate lives. Complete individual responsibility for everything in the house. Arthur sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. I have been a complete idiot. Yes, you have, but you can fix it. He looked up, hopeful. You forgive me? It is too early for forgiveness. First, you need to comprehend what you actually did. Sarah put her book down, grabbed her laptop. She sat down and opened her budget spreadsheet. Look, these are our household costs for the year. Every receipt is here. Arthur stared at the numbers, his face turning pale. Weekend dinners for your family, $9,000, just for groceries. That ignores my time, the gas, the cleaning. I had no idea. Regular groceries, $6,000. Utilities, $3,000. Supplies, $1,200. Gifts for both sides, $2,500. Sarah walked him through every tab. Arthur looked like he had seen a ghost. Basically, out of my $8,000 monthly salary, nearly everything went to our shared life. I kept maybe $500. Sarah, and you? Out of your $5,500 salary, you put in $150. The rest, over $5,000 every month, went to your watches, bar tabs, and your mother. Where is the fairness? Arthur, he had nothing to say. Sarah, shut the laptop. That is why I separated our finances, so you could see exactly what I pay for, my reward. Being told, my roast was slightly overcooked. She stood up and left the laptop on the table. Think it over, then we can talk. She stormed into the master suite and slammed the door. Caleb sat alone, head spinning. He really hadn't known. He never crunched the numbers. He just assumed Alina handled the cooking, the cleaning, and the home. He thought it was normal. In reality, he was the deadbeat. He lived in luxury, entirely subsidized by his wife, while paying zero. Then he had the audacity to claim he was tired of supporting her. That night he tried cooking. Boiled pasta with cold sauce, a total disaster. Forced it down. Alina walked out, seared a perfect steak with vegetables, and ate at the island. He sat in the living room. Silence. Sunday felt suffocating. Caleb tried to clean, but didn't even know where the supplies were. He vacuumed once and quit. He tried doing his own laundry, used the hot setting, and ruined his best sweaters. Alina ignored him. She worked, read, and watched movies, treating him like a ghost. That afternoon his mother called. He stepped out to the balcony. A brutal talk. Brenda demanded an apology and laid on the guilt. Caleb tried to explain the finances, but she refused to listen. When he walked back in, he looked drained. Alina noticed but stayed quiet. They slept on opposite sides of the bed. Caleb didn't sleep at all, but Alina rested easy. Monday began week 2. Caleb left early, skipping breakfast. He couldn't cook, and buying fancy coffee every morning was killing his bank account. Alina enjoyed her oatmeal and espresso before work. Her day was a sprint. A supply chain crisis in Asia caused a mess. Alina spent hours on the phone, coordinating logistics until the shipment moved. At lunch, she sat with an accounting manager. They talked shop and the weather. Alina said nothing about her marriage. She never aired her business. That night, Caleb got home late. Alina had already finished a meal of scallops. He checked the fridge. His shelf held half a loaf of white bread and a sad, lonely hot dog. He forgot to shop. He chewed the dry bread, washing it down with tap water. Alina sat on the couch, watching a movie, never glancing his way. Tuesday through Thursday, the misery continued. Caleb scavenged at the office cafeteria or bought fast food. In 1 week, he burned through $300 on junk. His dress shirts were wrinkled. He couldn't iron. His side of the bathroom was a mess. He couldn't clean it. Dishes piled up. Meanwhile, Alina thrived. She cooked gourmet, crushed her goals, and grabbed drinks with friends. She looked great. By Friday, Caleb hit his limit. He saw Alina in the kitchen making duck. It smelled incredible. He sat at the island watching her work. Finally, he spoke, voice cracking. "Alina, can we talk?" She turned around. "I am listening. I am sorry. I am so deeply, truly sorry. I get it now. I was wrong. I was selfish. I took you for granted, please. Can we go back to a joint budget and a real marriage without this separation?" Alina turned off the stove, wiped her hands, and sat across from him. "But under my rules, anything. I will keep a strict log of all spending. You will have full access to see every dollar at any time. Transparency agreed. Monthly family dinners, not weekly. We decide the menu beforehand. Understood? Yes. No more free meals for your family. My kitchen is not a takeout counter. Agreed. You never bring the toxic advice of your buddies into our house again. If we have a problem, you talk to me, not them. Promise." Alina stared in silence. "And finally, you will acknowledge that I am not at leech support. I am your equal. I contribute just as much as you, if not more. I know. God, I know that now. I admit it. Then fine. We go back to a joint budget." Caleb reached to hug her. Alina stopped him with a palm to his chest. "Hold on. I forgive you, but I do not forget. The words you said, that you were tired of supporting me. Those stick with me, Alina. I didn't mean it. I was just being an idiot. I know you were, but the words were spoken. Now I know that in a crisis, instead of having my back, you blamed me. That changed something permanently." She returned to the stove, but pulled out a second duck breast. Caleb sat at the island, a cold knot in his stomach. He realized he had broken a core pillar of their marriage, and it was his fault. A week later, Alina hadn't fully merged the accounts. She looked at him with cool, sharp eyes. "Too soon, Caleb. You still don't get it." Pleaded, but she wouldn't budge. Separate finances continued. Caleb kept surviving on fast food. His clothes stayed rumpled, his home messy. He was burning through cash while living worse than ever. Alina continued to prosper with gourmet meals and a growing bank account. On Monday of week 3, Caleb's phone rang, his mom. "We are coming over Saturday. We miss you." He froze. "Mom, maybe not. Things are tense." "What things? We can't visit our son." "We will be there at 1. For lunch." "Mom, wait, no buts. See you Saturday, click." Caleb stared at his phone in terror. What now? Alina wouldn't cook, and he couldn't feed 7 people. That night, he tried again. "Alina, my parents and my brother are coming Saturday." She didn't look up from her book. "I know. I heard you on the balcony. Will you help me?" "No, Alina, please. Just this once." She closed the book. Locking eyes with him. "Caleb, we have separate finances. Your family is your responsibility. It is fair, but I can't cook. Learn order delivery. Buy catering. You have options." Alina. "No, Caleb. I am serious. You wanted financial independence. Live with it." She walked into the bedroom. Caleb spent the week having a slow-motion panic attack. He searched for recipes, but it felt like solving quantum physics. By Thursday, he cracked. He ordered full catering from a nice Italian place for Saturday. pasta, salad, garlic bread, dessert. It cost $350, a huge chunk of his paycheck, but he had no choice. Friday night, he bragged to Elena, "I ordered catering. It arrives at noon tomorrow."
Great, very resourceful. Are you really not cooking anything? Nope. Are you even sitting with us? No. Why would I? It is your food, your money, your family.
"I wasn't invited. Elena, they will think you are crazy. Let them think what they want." Caleb gave up. He went to bed miserable. Saturday started poorly. Elena got up early, dressed perfectly, and announced she was spending the day downtown. "I will be back tonight. You are doing this on purpose, aren't you?" Caleb snapped. "No, I just have zero desire to be part of your circus." "Good luck." She left. Caleb was alone. At 11:30, his phone rang the restaurant. "Sir, I am so sorry. A plumbing emergency in our kitchen. We cannot fulfill your order. We are refunding you. It takes 3 to 5 business days." Caleb went cold. His parents were arriving in 90 minutes. He grabbed his coat and sprinted to the store. He ran down the aisles, hyperventilating. What could he make? He grabbed the cheapest penny, generic marinara, bread and butter. He had almost no money left until payday. He ran home, ripped open a box, and stood paralyzed. How do you boil it? How much water? How long? He guessed. He filled a pot with a tiny bit of water, cranked the heat, and dumped 2 boxes in. With barely any water, the pasta fused into a solid, starchy brick. Caleb cursed, scraping it out before dumping the burnt mess. He checked the clock. 12:45. Guests in 15 minutes. Panic set in. He grabbed the last box of penne. He ripped it open and dumped the raw, dry noodles onto 3 paper plates. He set the table with nothing but those plates of hard pasta. At 1 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Caleb looked like a ghost. Carol barged in, her Tupperware bag swinging. Michael, Liz, and the kids followed. "Smells weird," Carol noted. "Smells like nothing. Did Elena skip cooking?" "Come in," Caleb whispered. They shed their coats. The kids sprinted away. Carol eyed the table. "Food not ready?" "It is," Caleb stammered. "I will get it." Caleb laid out 3 plates of dry, uncooked pasta. Silence filled the kitchen. Everyone stared at the raw pen. Michael broke the quiet. "What is this?" Caleb sweated, unable to speak. Carol picked up a noodle, trying to snap it. "It is raw." Just then, Elena stepped from the hallway. She had not gone out. She had been waiting in the bedroom. The family turned. Elena stood there with a terrifying calm smile. "This on purpose," Carol shrieked. "What kind of garbage is this?" Elena strolled over, glancing at the raw pasta and her in-laws. "Eat up. We manage our finances separately now, remember?" She faced Caleb. "Only enough cash for dry noodles, right? Try not to break a tooth." Dead silence. Carol was stunned. Michael coughed, hiding a laugh. Liz covered her face. Caleb looked pale. "Elena, you stayed," he whispered. "I was in the bedroom watching you suffer, waiting for this moment." "Why?" "To prove a point," she said, scanning the in-laws. "So everyone here understands what separate finances actually mean." Carol found her voice. "Are you mocking us? We are family." "No." Elena cut in coldly. "You are Caleb's family. And you demanded separate finances, Carol. Remember? 3 weeks ago, you called it modern and convenient. I did not mean this. Then what did you mean? That I fund your lifestyle while you all eat for free? That is not how it works. We are family, not freeloaders. Family that visits every Saturday to pack Tupperware with my food. A family that, in 3 years, ate $27,000 of my money without one thank you." Carol went pale. "I did not know that. You did not care to know. You showed up gorged, critiqued and packed bags. I did the work and paid the bills. My reward was complaints about my cooking. Elena is right, Liz said softly. We absolutely took advantage of your kindness. Michael nodded. She is right. Carol glared at her son and the raw pasta. This is humiliation, agreed, Claire said. It is the same sting I felt when David called me a leech, even though I pay all our bills. She turned to David. See what it costs to feed these people with your own money. You blew your paycheck on a catering flop, and now you have only cheap noodles you cannot even boil. David stared down, defeated. I did that weekly for 3 years, thinking we were family. Claire snapped a dry noodle. Turns out we were not a family. I was just a free chef and an unpaid maid you were using, Claire. I am so sorry, David choked out. I have been a total fool. I did not get it. And now? Yes, I understand perfectly. Please forgive me. He dropped to his knees on the floor. He clasped his hands in desperation. Forgive me. Let us go back to how it was. I see everything now. I will value you. Not listen to my mom. Just please forgive me. Claire watched him for an agonizing minute. The room held its breath. Get up, David. He scrambled up, face streaked with tears. I forgive you. David let out a shuddering sigh and reached for her. She stopped him with strict conditions. Anything back to a joint account. But I control the ledger. You will see where every cent goes. Agreed. Monthly family dinners only. Agreed. No more Tupperware, ever. Eat what is served. If you want takeout, pay for it yourself. Carol flinched, but Richard silenced her. It is fair. David nodded frantically. Done. No more outside marital advice. If you have an issue, tell me directly. I swear, Claircia's voice turned cold. Finally admit, I am not a dependent. I am your equal partner. I contribute more to this house, and you will respect that. David nodded wildly, weeping. Yes, I swear you do everything for us. The best thing that ever happened to me. I am so sorry, Claire sighed. Fine. Starting Monday, finances are joint. David lunged to hug her. She patted his back stiffly, then pushed him away to face his parents. Carol, please stop giving marriage advice when you know nothing about our bank accounts. You nearly ruined my marriage. Her mother-in-law stared at the floor. I am sorry, Claire. I did not think it would lead to this, I know. That is why I am letting it go. Diane hugged Claire. Thank you for feeding us all those years. We have been awful. Richard stepped up. Claire, you are a boss. You taught us a hard lesson. The kids ran in, stopping at the table. Where is the food? Why are there just crunchy sticks? Everyone looked at each other. Laughter finally broke the tension. Claire smiled and headed for the kitchen. I will whip something up. The kids should not suffer for your stupidity. She unlocked her pantry. In 30 minutes, she served fluffy omelettes, fresh bread, and a charcuterie spread. A simple, satisfying meal. They ate in a strange, quiet atmosphere. It was a transition. After lunch, they left quickly. At the door, Carol hugged Claire awkwardly. Thank you for forgiving us. And David, you have a strong woman. I just do not tolerate injustice. Carol, they left. The door clicked shut. David looked at her with guilty eyes. Claire, did you really forgive me? Yes, David. I did so. Things go back to normal? Claire stayed silent. No, it will be different. Not necessarily worse, just changed. Because of what I said, yes. Something snapped between us. The blind trust. The certainty that we were an unbreakable team. Can I fix it? Time will tell. David nodded slowly. He knew this was his final chance. If he ruined it, there was no coming back. They cleared the table in silence. Life went on, but the foundation had shifted. A month passed since that Saturday. David truly changed. He turned sweet overnight, did chores without a word. Even asked about my marketing job. He cut off Brenda, only talking work stuff. Carol was different too. Came over once a month, ate dinner, thanked me, and left with no complaints. On the surface, things felt normal again, but inside I felt the crack. I looked at Mark and did not see the partner I trusted with my life. I saw a man who could turn on me at any second. A man who, when stressed, chose to blame me. I kept moving cash into my private high-yield savings. Every month, a huge chunk of my $8,000 check vanished into it. It was already over $25,000. My emergency escape hatch. Mark knew nothing. I needed that plan. I was ready to bolt. I was not that devoted wife anymore, who saw marriage as a permanent vow. My eyes were wide open now, fully aware of his flaws and exactly how cold he could get when things hit the fan. Knowledge changed everything. One freezing Chicago night, we were watching a movie. Mark put his arm around me. I did not pull away, but I did not lean in, just stared at the screen. "You happy, Sarah?" he asked. I did not answer. "I am content." "Is it about what happened?" "Yes." "Can I fix it?" "You are already trying, I see it, Mark. But these things take time." He pulled me closer. I let him. We finished the film tangled together, but my mind was miles away. No hate left, just a hollow feeling. Where love once lived, only caution remained. I did not hate him, but the spark was dead. That piece of me died. The second he told me I was a burden. No amount of grovelling could ever bring that back to life. The death was final. And that was the real tragedy. We kept living together, sharing a bed, eating at the same kitchen island. To the world, we were a successful high-earning couple, but the lights were out inside. Mark held on to hope, but I knew. Forgiven, but I had not forgotten. Some wounds just do not heal. They turn into ugly, permanent scars. Every time I looked at Mark, I saw the scar. I remembered the betrayal. I kept my walls high because I could not fully trust him. Without absolute trust, intimacy is impossible. A year passed then, too. We lived a peaceful, quiet life. Mark kept trying. I kept my distance. My escape fund grew. 40,000, 60, 85. One evening, Mark stared at me. "Sarah, will you ever really forgive me?" My face stayed blank. "I forgave you that day, Mark. But forgiving is not forgetting, and it certainly is not trusting again. So, you do not trust me? Not like before. Can I ever earn it back? I do not know, honestly. Probably not. Why stay?" I looked at the snow. Habit, I guess. Comfort. Divorce is a nightmare. "But you do not love me?" "I care, but it is different now, colder." Mark looked down at the granite. "I ruined it." "Yes, and it cannot be fixed. Probably not." We sat in silence, 3 feet apart, living in different worlds. Mark finally understood he had lost me for good. I was sitting in his kitchen, but my heart had checked out years ago. That was the price of his arrogance and those words. He had my pardon, but my love was gone forever. I kept working, cooking, and succeeding. Outside, nothing changed, but inside I was already free. Emotionally, I was done. I stayed out of routine and to avoid the legal headache of a split. But the love, it was gone. I knew one day I would walk out. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually. A life without love is only half a life, and Isa was never the type to settle for that.